Hello everyone. Today I'm going to respond to Alex O'Connor regarding a question he asked Dinesh D'Souza during their recent Pangburn discussion titled, "Is the Bible True?" The question that Alex asked is, and I quote, "Luke says that after the birth of Jesus the family fled to Egypt. Matthew says that they went to the Jerusalem temple. Are they both correct, or is one of them wrong?" Judging by the framing of this question, I can only reasonably conclude that Alex is attempting to imply that these two accounts contradict each other and therefore can't both be correct. I think it's important to keep in mind that the question of whether these two accounts are historically true, which of course refers to whether they actually occurred in history, is a separate issue from whether or not they contradict each other. I wholeheartedly believe that both of the events listed in these accounts did occur in history. But in this video, I am not going to attempt to demonstrate the historicity of either of these events. That's not the purpose of this video. The purpose of this video is to demonstrate that the accounts of both of these events do not contradict each other, since it very much seems like Alex was implying that they do contradict each other. Before we begin, just a quick point of clarification. It's actually in Matthew's Gospel that the family flees to Egypt, and in Luke's Gospel, they go to the temple in Jerusalem. Now that that's been corrected, let's begin by looking at the passage in Luke first. Luke chapter 2 verses 15 through 24 says, "And it came to pass, as the angels were gone away from them into heaven, the shepherds said one to another, Let us now go even unto Bethlehem, and see this thing which is come to pass, which the Lord hath made known unto us. And they came with haste, and found Mary and Joseph, and the babe lying in a manger. And when they had seen it, they made known abroad the saying which was told them concerning this child. And all they that heard it wondered at those things which were told them by the shepherds. But Mary kept all these things, and pondered them in her heart. And the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things that they had heard and seen, as it was told unto them. And when 8 days were accomplished for the circumcising of the child, his name was called Jesus, which was so named of the angel before he was conceived in the womb. And when the days of her purification according to the law of Moses were accomplished, they brought him to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. As it is written in the law of the Lord, every male that openeth the womb shall be called holy to the Lord, and to offer a sacrifice according to that which is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons." In this account, we see the shepherds go to Bethlehem after the angels were gone away from them into heaven. After they arrived in Bethlehem, they found Mary, Joseph, and the baby lying in a manger. Then they made known abroad the saying which they received concerning the child. It stated that Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart. Then the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God. When 8 days are fulfilled for the circumcision of the child, his name is called Jesus. They brought him to Jerusalem after the days of Mary's purification were accomplished according to the law of Moses, to present him to the Lord and to offer a sacrifice. For the purpose of this video, the timeline of this event is what we're going to zero in on. Because the question before us is, could this event and the event recorded in Matthew have both occurred after the birth of Jesus, or do they contradict one another? The answer to that question will obviously depend on the timeline of each event. If the timelines conflict with each other, then there's a problem. But if not, then there isn't a problem. So let's go through this. We see that the shepherds find Jesus in the manger along with Mary and Joseph. Then we see that Jesus is circumcised 8 days after he's born. And then he is brought to the temple after the days of Mary's purification are finished. Leviticus chapter 12, verses 2 through 4 makes it clear that the post-birth purification process lasted a total of 40 days if a woman gave birth to a son. This, of course, means that Mary and Joseph brought Jesus to the temple 40 days after he was born. That's the timeline of this event as recorded in Luke. Now we're going to look at the timeline of the event recorded in Matthew. Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 16. Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. And they said unto him, In Bethlehem of Judea. For thus it is written by the prophet, And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah. For out of thee shall come a governor, that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had privily called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, and said, Go and search diligently for the young child, and when ye have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. When they had heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star, which they saw in the east, went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned of God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeareth to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word. For Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night, and departed into Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt have I called my son. Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceeding wroth, and sent forth, and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem, and in all the coasts thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. In this account, we see that wise men from the east come to Jerusalem after Jesus is born, looking for the King of the Jews. Herod then takes it upon himself to find out where Christ should be born. He is told by the scribes and chief priests that Christ is to be born in Bethlehem. He then asks the wise men when the star appeared and sends them to Bethlehem to search for the child. They find the child in the house with Mary his mother and worship him. And then they are warned of God in a dream not to return to Herod. And Joseph is told by an angel of God in a dream to flee to Egypt because Herod is going to seek to destroy the young child. Then Herod has all of the children in Bethlehem and in all of the coasts of Bethlehem, who are 2 years old and under, killed, which was according to the time he inquired of the wise men. The timeline of this event starts off with the wise men coming to Jerusalem after Jesus has already been born. But the account doesn't tell us how long it's been since Jesus was born. However, verse 16 makes it clear that it had been 2 years since the star that the wise men followed had appeared, which is why Herod ordered the death of the children who were 2 years old and under. The obvious implication here is that Jesus could have been as old as 2 at this time. He could have also been younger than 2. But since the account doesn't tell us how old Jesus was at this time, how can we demonstrate that this account doesn't contradict the account that's recorded in Luke? Let me explain. In Luke's account, it's made clear that Jesus is brought to Jerusalem after Mary's days of purification are accomplished, which took 40 days. So Jesus was 40 days old at the end of the purification process, which of course doesn't include the time it took them to travel to Jerusalem. However, Matthew's account doesn't tell us how old Jesus was when he and Mary and Joseph fled to Egypt. But that's not actually something we need to know in order to show that these accounts do not contradict each other. When these accounts are read in their entirety, there doesn't seem to be any indication of a contradiction at all. However, when Alex asked Dinesh if Matthew and Luke were both correct about their respective accounts, or was one of them wrong, he asked the question in such a way that anyone who wasn't already familiar with these accounts would have gotten the impression that the accounts were identical until they differed in such a way that suggested a contradiction. But that's simply not the case. If Matthew stated that Jesus was immediately taken to Egypt after he was born, and Luke stated that Jesus was immediately taken to Jerusalem after he was born, then we would have a bona fide contradiction. But that's not at all how the accounts read, even though the framing of Alex's question regarding these accounts suggests that they do read that way. In Matthew's account, what precedes Jesus being taken to Egypt is the ordeal with Herod. In Luke's account, what precedes Jesus being taken to the temple is him being born and being laid in a manger. Any reasonable person would conclude that these are obviously two different accounts regarding two different timelines. The event of Jesus being taken to the temple in Luke after the days of purification clearly preceded the event of Jesus being taken to Egypt in Matthew. The only way for someone to conclude that there's a contradiction here is if they assume that both accounts are suggesting that both of these events occurred immediately after Jesus was born. But of course, there's nothing in the accounts that suggest or indicate that. That conclusion would have to be read into the text. A straightforward reading of both of these accounts suggests that the event in Luke occurred first and the event in Matthew occurred later on. This obviously has to be the case, since in Luke's account, Jesus is taken to the temple after Mary's days of purification are accomplished, which were accomplished after 40 days. 40 days after he was born. So clearly, him being taken to Egypt must have occurred later on. And there's nothing in the text that precludes this from being the case, but rather what we see in the text suggests that this is the case. Both of these events obviously could have occurred after the birth of Jesus, if they occurred at different times after the birth of Jesus. There's nothing in either account that precludes it from being the case that both of these events did in fact occur at different times after the birth of Jesus. If Matthew's account stated or implied that the event listed happened before the event in Luke, then there would certainly be a problem. But the account doesn't state that or even suggest it. So we can certainly conclude that the event in Matthew occurred after the event in Luke, which is the conclusion that the text itself suggests. In the account in Luke, Jesus is 40 days old at the end of Mary's purification. In the account in Matthew, it's indicated that Jesus could have been as old as 2. And by that time, Mary and Joseph and Jesus were staying in a house, not in a manger. So clearly some time had passed. So, in all honesty, there's no reason for anyone to think that these accounts contradict or conflict with each other in any way. Someone would have to make an assumption regarding these accounts in order to conclude that there's a contradiction between them. And I honestly think that is what Alex has done. So, in conclusion, based on the reading of the text, we can affirm that the event in Matthew occurred after the event in Luke. Nothing in the text precludes this from being the case, but rather it is indicated by the text itself. So, both of these events listed in these respective accounts did occur after the birth of Jesus. They just occurred at different times after the birth of Jesus. And based on how the accounts read, there is no reason for us to doubt this, but rather the accounts themselves suggest it. So it is the case that Matthew and Luke are both correct. Well guys, that's it for this video, so let me know what you think, and please remember to like and subscribe. Thank you.